I'm Keith Jones. Members of Congress toured the 1200 building at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School today for the first time. After that tour, they held a roundtable with parents who lost loved ones in the shooting 5 years ago. Here now are their thoughts on what was discussed and what it might mean for all of us in the future.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Jared Moskowitz, Congressman for 23rd District, which includes Parkland and Marjory Stoneman Douglas, where I live in Parkland and where I went to high school at Marjory Stoneman Douglas. Today, as a member of the School Safety Task Force, a School Safety Caucus in Washington, D.C., Max Schachter had brought an idea of bringing members through the building, the freshman building, where the shooting happened on February 14th, 2018. And that building is still a time capsule. It's exactly as it was the day after the shooting. And so, working with Mario beside me, we decided to take a bipartisan group of members that we invited to come and tour the building. And for me, who was here that evening on the 14th and was in this building the evening of the 14th as family members who were with us found out that their loved ones weren't leaving the building, it just reinvigorated why it's so important that we figure out a way to work together so that parents, family members, you know, when they send their loved ones to school, they get to see them again. And so I'm grateful to Max and to Tony and to Lori and to Debbie and to Ann, to the family members who allowed us to come do this. I'm grateful to Harold Pryor, the State Attorney's Office and law enforcement, who helped walk us through and showed us step by step the carnage that the shooter did. You know, I know we can figure out a way to make sure that other families don't become part of this exclusive club that these parents were involuntarily drafted into and have now crisscrossed the country. These families have crisscrossed the country to try to make sure that other families don't go through what they go through. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mario.
Thank you, Jared, and thank you for doing this, and most importantly to the families, you know, who have had to go through the most cruel and painful experience that one could ever imagine, and who've had to relive it time and time and time again. And as Jared said, going through that building is like going through a time capsule of that horrific moment. I am very grateful to the members of Congress who, in a very short notice, you know, joined us. This was Max Schachter's idea, and came to Jared and I, and we called our colleagues and those who could made it, and with very short notice, and I'm exceedingly grateful to them. There are a lot of things that have taken place. Florida has led the effort. The state legislature, you were a big part of that, and I'm so grateful to you for that. The state of Florida has done a lot. On the federal level, we've done some things as well. But it goes out without saying that you can never do enough, and we need to continue to do more. And the reality is that in order to do more, we have to kind of figure out where we agree. And I think most folks would agree on 60, 70, 80% of what those additional steps should be. But we have to be willing to kind of take those steps together. And I'm hoping this is, again, another way to reinvigorate those conversations. And it's not just the conversations for conversation's sake, but to actually get results from Washington. And so, again, I'm no words to express. Well, again, it's one of those things that you don't want to see. But I'm grateful to these families that they've allowed us to do that, to see this, the aftermath of this horrific day. And so, again, just my gratitude to the family members. Also, to all those others who again, as Jared said, guided us through and really on a kind of like second by second explained to what was going on in that horrific day. And so it's the key here is to not just come and see. The key is, can we then put aside some differences, put aside the perfect to try to get some good things done. And I'm optimistic that, like we've done some things in the past, we'll continue to do more, because this is an area that we have to get right, and we can never, ever think that we have done enough to make our schools as safe as they can be. And I would add that it's not, whatever we do for our schools really transcends just that. It also can apply to other areas where people get together, whether it's houses of worship, etc. And so I'm grateful to all my colleagues, but again, primarily grateful to the families who have suffered just more than anybody could ever imagine, and the fact that they're willing to do this and spend the time with us and have been doing this for day in, day out, and have made such an amazing difference. And because of their efforts, kids are safer today in schools, but we need to make sure that we continue to work to make them even safer.
Max, you want to say something?
After I walked through that building, I said I need to have all members of Congress come with me and walk through that building. And I want to thank all the members who took their time on a very, very short notice to come down here. We wanted to bring them through this building so that they understand the failures. I think they really do now. They get it. And in that room, I'm rejuvenated in thinking that there's a lot of agreement here that we can come together on and to make our schools safer and prevent this from ever happening again. So thank you to all of you. Thank you to Jerry. Thank you to Mario for making this happen, and thank you to the school board.
Just like to say we really appreciate all the congressional members who came down. As you'll notice, it's a bipartisan group. That is the only way we are going to pass lasting and meaningful legislation in Congress that will make our students and our teachers safer. Both Republicans and Democrats want safe schools for their children. We have to come together as an American family. We have to put our differences aside and find a way to get things done. The people here, they had fulsome discussions in there. They realize that they could come together and make some of that change. We're hopeful to see more of their colleagues join them, and we're thankful, again, for them coming down here, for the courage of Debbie and Lori, Max, and Ann, my wife Jennifer, who was here earlier. We wake up every day with the terrible knowledge of the loss of our children or our spouses. It's terrible. Going through that school heightens that, and we think it changes everybody who's been there. We're hopeful that the Congress members who came today will take what they learned back to D.C. and be able to build consensus around positive changes. We look forward to their actions.
I have hope. Today, having these conversations with the Congress members here today, I have hope that we can find common ground to protect our kids when they go to school. The horrific building, the tragedy that happened in the 1200 building, it's so painful to be able to see the bullet holes in the wall, the glass on the floor, the blood where my daughter, Alyssa, was tragically murdered that day in room 1216. But I have hope. I have hope that after today, the congressmen and congresswomen will go back to Congress and take action. We brought forward vital pieces of school safety legislation, bipartisan legislation like Alyssa's Act, panic buttons in schools. So in a press of a button, we can get law enforcement to know that there's an active shooter or medical emergency on the scene so they can get there as quickly as possible. Also, the Safer Schools Act, where schools can do a school security risk assessment, and then based on those vulnerabilities, they could apply for that crucial federal funding. And then the strengthening our schools, where we could provide that crucial funding that we need for our school resource officers and for that training. So as the chair of the Broward County School Board, and we want to have every member of Congress, we're going to have another date for them to come, and I challenge every congressman and congresswoman to come and walk through the 1200 building, have these roundtable conversations with the families so that together we can make our schools safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. And as I did previously before, we'll do the same thing. We'll send a letter to every person who serves in Congress, Democrat and Republican, inviting them again to come. And I appreciate the school board and the families and the state attorney's office for allowing that to happen. So we'll wait for another date. And with that, we're happy to take any questions.
So can you talk about, this is for the legislators, for both of you. Will this impact how you look at gun legislation?
Well, I'm the wrong person to ask that question to, because as you know, within 3 weeks of what happened at my high school, we passed the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School Safety Act, right, which raised the age to buy any gun to 21, 3-day waiting periods, red flag laws. It was one of the most progressive pieces of legislation when it was passed here in Florida. Other states passed it after us. We did mental health. We created an Office of School Safety. We did SROs in all the schools. We did the Guardian program. We created the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School Safety Commission to look at all of the failures. And so it was a legislative response to what happened at my high school. And so, look, that was a bipartisan bill. It was led by folks across the aisle because, as you know, they're in charge in Tallahassee. And so, for me, it is a rubric on how you try to get things done. Look, we're not naive. Washington works a little different. But I think we can find ways to work together. There's massive disagreements that wasn't solved in today's in the room on how to address it and what to include. But I think what we all share is a commitment that the status quo isn't acceptable, and we got to figure out, what the solutions are. Anyone else want to add anything? Please, John. Yeah, John. Absolutely.
I'd like to talk a little. He talked about the state response. I'd like to talk just very briefly about the congressional response. Shortly after this, I had dropped the bill, the Stop School Violence Act of 2018, filed that bill on January 30th of 2018, exactly 2 weeks before the shooting here. And the importance of that bill is it provides money, grant money, to school boards and law enforcement agencies to do two things. Number one is create networks of investigative ability in finding who the students might be or the others that might be who have a propensity to become an active shooter before they become an active shooter. We want to prevent it before it occurs. But then the second thing is it provides for, it's called CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. And that is commonly called hardening the target. Now, as we travel through the 1200 building today, it was not lost on me the speed with which the death and carnage occurred. All of it, less than 4 minutes. 14 people are killed and injured in less than 4 minutes. CPTED is designed to slow all of that down, if not prevent it completely. And so that was that bill was passed. Here's where we need your help. We've put millions of dollars. In fact, to date, we've spent about $704 million of Stop School Violence Act money. But we need more school boards asking for that money. They should be beating down our door at DOJ for that money. And so I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that that's even out there. The Stop School Violence Act of 2018 is providing millions of dollars to harden our schools and prevent active shooters from occurring in the first place.
Congressman, what would it take if this is not enough, walking through the halls of the 1200 building, if that is not enough to export some of the reforms that have been passed in Florida on the federal level, seeing this sort of visceral carnage in your words, that's all over the hallways, the pain the families have gone through, what will it take, right? Because it's pretty clear there's still not bipartisan agreement. What is the threshold that would be required to actually see some sort of federal action on an issue where there's been such stagnation for decades?
That was all federal action I was just talking about.
Well, you're talking about $700 million. I'm really referring more to mandatory red flag laws, addressing some of the raising the purchase age for weapons. Certainly the assault weapon style discussions I know are controversial, but any of these matters have not been tackled on the federal level.
Well, let me say this, right? So, look, last year, right, last Congress, they passed the first gun violence prevention law that had been passed in 30 years, right? And so that's progress. D.C. D.C. works a little different. In the state legislature, we had 3 weeks left in that legislative session. That's what provided that pressure to get something done. We don't have that. Doesn't exist in Washington. What today is not walk people through the building and within a blinking of an eye we're going to have bills on the floor. But we have to start that conversation again. We have to figure out where there is agreement. We know where we disagree, but we have to figure out where we agree, and we have to figure out how we build trust between the two parties to work together to where things didn't get politicized. I remember in those 3 weeks in Tallahassee, everyone was rowing in the same boat. We had massive disagreement, the Democrats and Republicans, on what should wind up in the bill. But what everyone understood is we had to have a response and we had to do something. We have to figure out how to rebuild those lines in D.C. of trust on how we can get to a solution. And to be clear, there is not a solution to this, where once we do it, we're finished. Right? This is about mitigating and about constantly coming back and constantly looking at it. That's why when we established that Marjory Stoneman Douglas School Safety Commission, they've come back now every single solitary year with more things to do. And that's what this is. This is a constant fight. There's not one piece of legislation we can pass that ends this. I mean, Jamal knows that this is happening in communities across the country every single solitary day, not in schools, not in churches, not in grocery stores, but in neighborhoods where a kid is sitting on their couch and a bullet whizzes through drywall and kills them while they're watching television. And so, look, this is about us trying to find out where we can work together, and I'm appreciative to the members who traveled from California to be here and members across the aisle who came here to try to figure out how we can help these families and other families address this issue and try to limit this stuff from happening in the country.
Can we hear from the families about how you feel about the reenactment today? Obviously, it's happening on the same day, and it's hard to, separate the feeling and all that with
we're all in support of the reenactment. The jury that watched the video during the criminal trials, there was no audio in that video. And so that's why we're doing the reenactment, and we believe that it will show that there's no possible way that Scott Peterson didn't hear the 70 rounds from an AR-15 when he was just feet away from that building. So we support all the efforts that are happening today. I'm heading right over there after this, and we hope that the judge will use all of this reenactment that they're recording, and Scott Peterson will face some accountability for his inaction and his failure that day.
So how do we get there? I've been to D.C. many times, and I see the divide between Republicans and Democrats. There's a huge chasm there. How do you bridge that gap between Republicans and Democrats on this issue, considering that they can't get along for the most part on many issues until right now?
And I think that's a key question, but I think part of it is, look, we all have very strong feelings on a large number of things. And when you're dealing with this issue and the myriad of the separate parts of this issue, there are very strong feelings. And it's tempting to want to just go out on the political issues, knowing, by the way, everybody knows that if that's where you go, you're not going to get anywhere. So the question is, can we, all of us, Republicans and Democrats, kind of try to put aside some of those more contentious issues? You can keep that debate going, that's fine. But while you do that, put some of those aside so that we can figure out where in that center we can actually agree on some things that will actually make a difference. And I will tell you, who's been leading those efforts are the loved ones of the folks that died on that day. And so that's why we're extremely grateful. But all of us, the elected officials, and I would argue, by the way, the talking heads out there as well, have to be willing to put aside the areas that I know people feel very deeply on, but that we know we're not going to reach agreement on, to try to find towards the center the things that will actually protect our children, keep them safe, and, by the way, that can get real bipartisan support. It's the only way to do it.
So what did you agree on? What did you discuss that you all could agree on during that 2 hours that could actually develop into some change?
Well, first, I want to remind folks that last year we did, as was mentioned, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which had money for things that we talked about today, investments in mental health, money for schools to be able to do more preventive safety. So we need to build on that. What I heard today, just as nuts and bolts, are things like investing in making sure that we're giving money to schools to put in maybe bulletproof glass on the doors, maybe designing the doors differently so they're not locking the way they locked at Marjory Stoneman Douglas School. So some of them were investments in infrastructure for schools. It's also making sure that if we're going to mandate something on the federal level, such as panic buttons, that we're providing the funding. And so we can mandate all the time, but then if schools have to then cut, they may not be able, to provide the education they want and the safety. So I think that was something we also talked about. These are just some things. And again, it's an initial conversation. A lot of what we did today was hear from the families, as well as members being able to talk about where we might be able to start. The other important thing that happened today is you had a room where Democrats and Republicans got together, put that aside to get to know each other and to talk about their interest in this issue. And that is the start of a relationship. And that is the start of what needs to happen more. Now, in Congress, there is something called the Reagan-O'Neill Club, and there is bipartisan efforts. But it's not generally around a topic like this, which I think is that starting point that today really triggered, that I think will result in progress down the road.
Yeah, let me just quickly add, today was a major first step in the right direction. We're beginning a conversation, a bipartisan conversation around a very specific issue. We just had a shared experience that will transform our lives for the rest of our lives. To see the blood of children on the floor in a school together is going to change the way we interact and collaborate with each other going forward. And I am already in touch with leadership of the House via text messages telling them they have to get down here. And that's what I want to see. I want to see leadership in the House, leadership in the Senate. I want to see the White House come down here, take the tour. They walked us through minute by minute of what happened that day. And we got a chance to hear from families, the families of who have lost loved ones. We got to hear from them. So while we're playing politics and theater and all of that in Washington, these families are grieving every day. And it's time for us to shut our mouths and come here and listen to the families. And not just here. Sandy Hook. Unfortunately, there are too many examples across the country where we need to do a lot more listening and speaking. And the fact that we are here in a bipartisan way is an example that we are trying to move in the right direction and have the right conversations.
Hey, Lori, you all said that you're going to invite people back again. Are you all going to invite other delegations to come, like legislators, White House people? And also, why don't you have the media there if the idea is to make people experience the horror of what happened?
So thank you for the question. It's absolutely a conversation that I'll have with our new superintendent, Dr. Peter Licata, on the logistics. But again, we want to have another opportunity so more of our elected officials and what that looks like, I'll have the superintendent make that decision. Thank you.
Lawmakers, were there any next steps you discussed today that maybe you hadn't thought of before, and what are they?
Well, I mean, yeah, no, there were a lot of ideas discussed, from bills that are currently filed to bills that were previously filed to ideas that were in larger pieces of legislation, trying to narrow them down. So again, to Jamal's point and Mario's point, right, we're getting in a room, we're trying to figure out where the ideas are, where there are synergies, you know, having that shared experience, which I've witnessed with these families for 5 years. There's nothing more powerful than visualizing what happened in that building. And I'm hoping that it breaks the walls down and we figure out where we can mitigate this from happening, not just in schools, but in communities, with an understanding that there's still going to be disagreements and there's still going to be things that I want done that, you know, they won't do, and there's things that they want done that I won't do. But that should not impact us from the things that we know we should be doing for parents and for families and for teachers, and for we got to move past that. And so, yeah, look, I will reinvite working with the families and law enforcement and the school board. I will reinvite every single member of Congress. I want Republican leadership to come. I want Democratic leadership to come. That's what happened 5 years ago from Tallahassee. The governor was here. The Commissioner of Agriculture was here. The CFO was here. The Speaker of the House was here. The Senate President was here. Majority leadership, minority leadership, they all came to the school. And the fact that this building is still here as a time capsule, which is unique, I think having that opportunity for folks to understand, rather than talk about it, rather than go on TV and see it from far away, but to actually go through the building. I mean, it is an out-of-body experience.
So there was talk about taking down the building soon, but it sounds like you guys are now going to ask that it be kept up for a while.
Well, look, that's not up to me. That's up to the school board and the families to decide. I mean, obviously, there's an inevitability. The building is going to come down. The timeline of that, you know, might be up for debate. And exactly how you do that, are students on campus when it happens, or students not on campus? Those are the things that they're talking about. But I mean, quite frankly, I've been an advocate to take the building down as soon as the families and were ready and the trial was done. But after walking through that building today, I mean, there's value in giving it a little bit more time to bring decision makers through that building.
Was a gun ban discussed today?
Gun ban?
Was there a gun ban, like pushing for legislation to ban guns?
Oh, we talked all issues. There was nothing off the table. Again, there's agreement some places, there's disagreement some places. But no, everything was discussed.
Do you mind just going over, just to piggyback on my fellow reporter here, you said that it was a bulletproof glass, some infrastructure for the school, but can you add a couple of bullet points of things that were agreed upon today?
Well, I mean, when we say agreed upon, I mean understanding, like, here's what we're talking about, right? There are gun violence prevention issues to discuss, right? There's agreement, disagreement. There are policy issues to discuss, having nothing to do with school safety, but actual, like, policy issues in the community, mental health, things of that nature, law enforcement. And then there's things to discuss within the building itself, right? Whether that's, you know, bulletproof doors or hurricane glass. One of the things that was striking is that building has all hurricane glass. And yet 25 feet from the hurricane glass that's on the outside of the building is a door with a glass window made of regular glass. And every time the murderer wanted to shoot into a classroom, he didn't go into the classroom. He did it from the window in the hallway. But when he tried to kill students fleeing the building from the 3rd floor, his rounds didn't go through the hurricane glass. So because we have hurricane code, that glass on the outside protected students fleeing the building, but the glass on the inside protected nobody. And so those are some of the striking things you can see when you walk through the building. When you see that every classroom has a metal door, but the rounds went right through it because the door is hollow. So those are the infrastructure things we're talking about. But no, look, this was a full conversation, full range of issues.
Mario, necesitamos algo en español.
Absolutely.
¿Cómo no?
Son
No.
momentos, lo que fue hoy para usted caminar esos pasillos y lo que han debatido.
No, es difícil estar en la presencia de este horror, ¿no? Donde este es un edificio que se ha mantenido como el día después de este incidente tan horroroso. Así que eso emocionalmente es muy difícil de ver, y estábamos con muchos de los familiares que han perdido seres queridos en esa escuela. Pero al mismo tiempo pudimos ver, ¿no? No solamente es presenciar realmente el acto, o sea, una cosa tan horrorosa, pero al mismo tiempo para aprender de algunos de los errores cometidos. Mira, por ejemplo, este asesino, este diablo, no entró a las aulas. Él disparó de afuera de las aulas por una ventanita en todas las puertas. Y si hubiese, por ejemplo, ese vidrio hubiese sido vidrio protegido, hubiera salvado muchas vidas. Hay cosas así, algunas tan sencillas como esa, otras cosas más complicadas, pero de nuevo, yo estoy tan agradecido a los familiares que han perdido seres queridos, que han tenido que revivir esto una y otra vez a través de los juicios, múltiples juicios, que siguen teniendo que sentir esa experiencia, y que hoy un grupo de ellos estuvieron con nosotros, caminando esos pasillos donde ahí todavía está la sangre de sus seres queridos, algo realmente muy difícil. Y la pregunta es si podemos utilizar este momento para hacer aún más, para proteger a nuestros hijos y nuestras hijas en las escuelas. A nivel estatal, Florida ha hecho mucho para proteger a nuestros hijos en las escuelas. Y a nivel federal hemos hecho algunas cosas también sumamente importantes, pero siempre hay mucho más que podemos hacer, y por eso yo estoy tan agradecido, obviamente, primero a los parientes, a los familiares que han perdido seres queridos que estuvieron con nosotros, y no solamente en la escuela, pero después en esta reunión, pero también a mis colegas de ambos partidos que han aceptado esta invitación para ver de primera mano lo que ocurrió en esta escuela y buscar formas de evitar el partidismo, para buscar aún más soluciones positivas para proteger a nuestros niños en las escuelas.
¿Hay voluntad de ambos partidos para poder sacar mejores leyes y más?
Yo creo que estos colegas, y hay otros que no pudieron ir, pero estos colegas vinieron con una invitación no tenían más de 2 semanas, creo que para hacer esto. Todos tenían planes y rompieron esos planes para estar aquí. Sin duda hay voluntad para tratar de proteger a nuestros hijos en las escuelas. Siempre hay divisiones, porque hay diferencias de opinión. Y lo importante es tratar de poner esas diferencias, evitar esas diferencias, sabiendo cuáles son, esas podemos seguir debatiéndolas, y eso es positivo, pero al mismo tiempo buscar en las áreas donde sí podemos llegar a un consenso para hacer aún más para proteger a nuestras escuelas. Y no solamente es proteger a nuestros hijos y nuestras hijas en las escuelas, pero eso también puede tener el impacto de proteger en otras áreas también.
I have a question for Congress members. When you walk through that building, we all have an idea of what we want to see when it comes to school safety. You have that idea in your head. When you walk through that building, did anything change for you? That you thought, maybe it's something else I'm going to see that I didn't consider before?
Sheriff, you want to take that? Or you want? I mean, whoever. Yeah, I'll start. First, as Mr. Rutherford has mentioned, is just how fast this happened, and you kind of realize just how fast that is. Number two, the other thing that hit me is just the multiple failures one after another, going back from, before this individual obviously did this to then when we were getting close to the incident, and then throughout the incident, the multiple failures that obviously you have all heard time and time again. But it really is obviously dramatic to see. And you ask what I was, to tell the truth, I was kind of dreading this moment, but I'm glad I was here. And I'm incredibly grateful to the loved ones, because I can't even imagine what it has to feel like to relive those moments time and time again, as they've had to do through trial and then the next trial, and so I just hope that we can, again, while we have very strong feelings and a lot of number of things, that we can put some of those aside, consensus and somewhat in the middle, to continue to do the things that we know work and that we know we can get bipartisan support for.
Does it change your view on gun laws at all?
That's precisely what I was kind of mentioning, is that we all have to kind of take a step back and put aside those issues which might be the ones that get all the headlines, but that we know are very difficult to get bipartisan support on. And so I do think, by the way, that Florida is a great starting point to look at what Florida did in this great state. Once again, Florida has been leading these efforts, like it does on most issues, the Florida legislature. And so those are good starting points. And I don't want to minimize some of the things that, what the state of Florida has done, and also some of the things that Congress has done. But needless to say, we have a lot more work to do.
Last question.
I have a question for the families. I know that, we've kind of talked about that the building is set to be demolished sometime in the future. And I'm wondering, now that, 5 years have gone by, how everyone is sort of dealing with the demolition soon to be happening. If you want to share any thoughts or feelings about that.
Well, I think first of all, it's important to remember that we needed the building to stay up as we ran through the trial process and the civil and the justice system. We do need that to finish up. We do have a civil lawsuit. That's why the reenactment is going on today. That reenactment will hopefully help us attain justice through the court system, justice which has so far eluded our families. I think there's a multitude of feelings for all of us regarding the building, and I won't pretend to speak for the others, but I will say for myself, when the building does come down, we need to make sure there's an appropriate memorial on that space. That is hallowed ground. We can't just make it a parking lot. We should have something that's visible from the road, something so people know where the tragedy took place. But we should always remember that it was a tragedy because of who we lost. Because my beautiful daughter Gina, Max's son Alex, Ann's son Helena, Lori's daughter Alyssa, Debbie's husband Chris, and all the others were taken from this community, were taken from our families by the monster, by the failures that occurred. And we know that's why we have people here, and we're thankful for those who are willing to work together to solve the problems. We've done a lot here in Florida, and we're going to continue to work in Florida, and we're going to continue to work federally. We just have to be patient, let it take its course, proceed one step at a time, and I am confident that we will see more congressional action. Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you.